guys, welcome back. Today we're going to keep talking about Dark Elves, and we're going to start by talking about their homeland of Naggaroth. Naggaroth is the land of chill, a bleak and forbidding territory that is as unforgiving as the Dark Elves who have made it their home. Its northern plains are barren and windswept expanses, broken only by jutting outcrops of rock. Magic-stained rivers, their waters sluggish and black, crisscross the ice fields, carving elaborate canyons and deep ravines in the frozen ground. Further south, the thin soil is slightly more fertile, allowing sparse pine forests to grow. Here, the Dark Elves have huge plantations to feed the cities, worked by slaves who labor until they drop dead, their bodies left to nourish the barren soil. Most Dark Elves live in one of the realm's heavily fortified cities, whose sinister pinnacles rise high into the storm-racked sky. These are the most depraved settlements in the known world, where murder lurks in every shadow, and the weak are slain for the amusement of the strong. To dwell in a Naggarothi city is to walk side by side with death every day of your short life. Naggarond, the Tower of Cold. Naggarond is the oldest and largest of the Dark Elves' cities, and quite likely the most malevolent place in the world. Its outer walls form an imposing circlet of black stone, in no place less than 100 feet tall. About the ramparts are set 100 towers, each rising as high above the battlements as the walls rise above the bare rock. From these towers fly the Witch King's dark banners of flayed skin. Severed heads and raven-worried limbs rot upon spikes about the walls, grisly reminders of the price of denying Malekith's will. Behind its impenetrable walls, Naggarond rises high into the foothills of the Iron Mountains. The city is a jumble of mansions, barracks, temples, slave pits, and crooked alleys, all swathed in a perpetual pall of smoke. Through chill day and frozen night, worshippers of Cain tear beating hearts and tangled entrails from their still living victims and cast them into the flame pits of their hungry god. Thus is the very air of Naggarond thick with the essence of murder. Few walk carelessly through these streets. Those seeking sacrifices make no distinction for rank or loyalty. Cain's thirst is slaked as readily by the highest of dreadlords as it is by the lowliest of slaves. Murder and thievery of all kinds are rife, for the Witch King tolerates any and all deeds, save for those that inconvenience his rule. Indeed, Malekith provokes discord, for anarchy serves to weed out the weak, and thus make his people stronger. To this end, he deliberately sparks contests that set one noble house against another, encourages revolt amongst the innumerable legions of slaves, and sets the hag queens of the murder cults at one another's throats. Such turmoil frequently leaves quarters of Naggarond in scorched and blood-soaked ruin, but the Witch King cares not so long as the feeble perish and the strong survive. At the center of Naggarond stands the Black Tower. No mere fortress is this, but a city within a city. A maze of palaces, ramparts, and towers, huddled within its curtain walls, and jut from its sheer sides. Here dwell those nobles held highest in Malekith's regard, an honor that brings wealth and patronage, but also danger. The Witch King has ever been a volatile monarch, generous when fortune smiles, but unflinchingly merciless when all does not go his way. Naggarond's court is therefore a place of rapid rises and meteoric descents. Few can play this game of politics for long, and none who take part die a natural death. The central bastion of this tower belongs to Malekith alone, and none save the Black Guard of Naggarond are granted entrance without the Witch King's permission. Neither torches nor lanterns are permitted within. Though he would never admit it, the Witch King has long been discomforted by wholesome flame. Many of these rooms and passageways lie entirely in gloom, and others are dimly lit by the bloody glow of accursed sigils. Few dark elves enter these shadowed chambers without pressing gauze, for they lie heavy with neglect, dust, and an unmistakable melancholy. When Naggarond was founded, the Witch King intended his citadel to rival the finery and splendor of Ulthuan's greatest mansions. However, as the millennia crawled by, Malekith lost the taste for fripperies and fleeting indulgence. The lower chambers, which once glittered with light and rang to the wild laughter of courtiers and companions, are now desolate and web-haunted, full of faded tapestries and haunting silence. Only in the upper reaches are the glories of yesteryear maintained. Here, in rooms bedecked with plunder from around the globe, the Witch King holds court and makes his plans against hated Ulthuan. The council chamber is a particularly gruesome spectacle. Its vaulted roof is lost in shadow, and its walls are draped in tapestries woven from bloodied hair. The jagged likenesses of cruel gods stare down from the intricately carven buttresses, their eyes glowing in the darkness. At the center of the room sits a vast circular table, struck from a single slab of obsidian. 100 chairs of blackened bone and flayed skin sit alongside. Some are occupied only when the council meets. Others are permanently engaged, for their occupants are long dead, having displeased Malekith in ages past. It is whispered that one of the corpses was once close kin to the Witch King, a brother perhaps, or maybe even a son. Some of these dead counselors are desiccated and brittle, testament to their centuries of service. Others are relatively fresh, with maggots and beetles crawling through still fleshy skulls. Sweet dreams. Malekith's iron throne sits at the head of this table, but he much prefers to prowl about the perimeter so that no one can ever be certain where his fitful gaze lies. Occasionally, he will call for silence and make play of holding a one-sided conversation with one of the corpses. It is impossible to know whether he truly speaks with the dead, or merely does so for macabre effect. Certainly, no one has ever dared ask. Nor do any question the need for such a council in a land bent to one supreme rule. It is simply Malekith's will, so it is done. When not consumed by the matters of war and state, the Witch King retires to his personal rooms at the very top of the citadel, and the scrying chamber therein. It is said that there is no corner of the world hidden from Malekith's sorcerous vision, and that he can direct his view wherever his malicious intent demands. However, his gaze is ever drawn to the mist-shrouded Isle of Ulthuan, the birthright he so desperately wishes to claim as his own, or else see destroyed. Ghrond, prophecy. In the absolute north stands the slender spire of Ghrond. This is the domain of Malekith's mother, the beautiful seeress Morathi. From Ghrond's pinnacle, sorceress of the Dark Covenant can see through the snowstorms that whip about the tower and into the ever-shifting realm of chaos. It is said that the patterns of change therein hold the secrets of fate, and that all the mysteries of the world are laid bare to she who dares look. Every day, black-clad riders gallop from the Tower of Ghrond, bearing prophecies southward to Naggarond. These foretell auspicious moments in which the Witch King will meet with success, or carry warnings of an enemy's growing power. Morathi rules Ghrond without compromise, and does not tolerate interference from outside. It is one thing for the hag sorceress to support Malekith in his rule, but quite another for her to accept it herself. The Witch King tolerates his mother's small rebellions so long as her tithes are promptly delivered and generous in scope. And generous they are, for the mines beneath Ghrond have ever been rich in gold, silver, and gemstones of all kinds. Even after thousands of years, there remains sufficient wealth buried beneath Ghrond to buy the loyalty of every elf in Naggaroth. Ghrond is legendary as a luxurious palace of decadence, not just in Naggaroth, but in many distant lands also. The tales are rendered all the more alluring by a law that forbids male elves from entering its inner sanctums, save at Morathi's decree. Those few who are admitted are at once the most cursed and blessed of mortals, for their lives and their deaths serve only the hag sorceress's pleasure. For those who do not catch Morathi's eye, there is only a life of battle against the horrors of the northern wastes. Demons, monsters, and worshippers of the Chaos Gods are drawn constantly to Ghrond and to the heady broth of sorcery and excess that flows about its walls. The defense of Ghrond is therefore a near-ceaseless battle, fraught with danger and privation. Yet the dark elves who defend the ramparts never consider desertion to softer lands. Captivated by Morathi's beauty and their own desires, they are as much slaves to the hag sorceress as the wretches who toil in the mines below. The coveted lands. The Dark Elves will never be content ruling only Naggaroth, for they consider all Ulthuan to be their birthright, but there are two regions of their sundered home that they desire above all. The Shadowlands are the remains of ancient Naggaroth, where Anarion held court at Anlek, and from these lands the ancestors of the Naggarothi sprung. Though the Dark Elves have invaded Naggaroth many times, no conquest has endured. Each time Anlek has been rebuilt, the Phoenix King's soldiers have cast it down. North of Anlek lies the Blighted Isle, site of the Shrine of Cain. Many wars have been fought across its skull-strewn plains, and at night the spirits of the dead battle anew, forever captured by the will of Cain. The struggle for the Shrine of Cain is symbolic of the struggle in the soul of the elf race. None can say how it will end, or, indeed, if it will ever end. Karond Kar, Tower of Despair. Even in a land where misery and torment are the currency of daily life, Karond Kar can be counted the bleakest of all refuges. The citadel stands a sentinel on the edge of the Sea of Chill, perpetually battered by gale-force winds, icy rain, and tidal waves the size of mountains. Its folk can therefore be counted amongst the hardiest of a hard people. Indeed, they have become so acclimatized to their frozen conditions that more temperate climes cause them a measure of discomfort. Karond Kar is known as Slaver's Gate, for it is to here that the great reaving fleets bring their living cargo. Countless thousands die as they cross the wide seas of Karond Kar, stifled and suffocating in the hulls of slave ships, or tortured to death for the amusement of the black-hearted crews. Those are the lucky ones. When the survivors are finally unloaded onto the ice-wreathed docks, they soon find that their torment is just beginning. There is no escape from Karond Kar. From the docks, the slaves are brutally driven forth amidst jeering crowds, beaten onward by lash and scourge. Those that stumble are trampled. Those who slip their spiked chains are flayed, then cast bodily into the icy ocean. Both forms of death are much appreciated by the madding spectators, who throw rocks to trip the panicked slaves, and send servants to break the chains, whilst the captives are still dockside, in the hopes of inciting even more violence. The slave markets are vast, and those captives that make it to the wide-open plazas beyond the docks are roughly examined and divided by age and gender, destined to labor in mines and quarries, or drudge in the dungeons and kitchens of Naggaroth. Overlooking the markets are the slave traders' palaces, slab-sided mansions decorated with the scrimshawed bones of previous slaves. Bones of perished slaves. Night and day, Karond Kar echoes with tortured wails, for its sorcerers delight in binding together their captive souls to their mortal remains. Trapped between life and death, these wretches haunt the streets of the Slaver's Gate, filling the dreams of their tormentors with delicious images of suffering and pain. The traders themselves seldom leave the comforts of their opulent homes, but can be occasionally lured into the rain-drowned plazas by news of a particularly impressive bounty. A captured high elf is the most valuable of prizes, and a wealthy slaver will gladly trade much of his remaining stock, or even members of his own family, for the opportunity to bring such a sweet meat before his patron's tender mercies. For more commonplace cargoes, slavers hold audiences and auctions within their chambers, playing off the greed of corsair captains to ensure a healthy profit. The slave masters drive a hard bargain, and no fleet leaves Karond Kar with wealth equal to its expectations. However, no captain will challenge the terms of a trade once it has been completed, for they know that assassins aplenty lurk in the crowds, waiting silently for the slave master's commissions. Better to leave Karond Kar with a light purse, they reckon, than to never leave it at all. Har Ganeth, City of Executioners. Har Ganeth is a cursed place. A madness overtook the city long ago, a thirst for blood and flesh that ever since has only been kept in abeyance by some of the strictest laws in all Naggaroth. Only in Har Ganeth are acts such as murder, thievery, and public debauchery considered to be crimes, a hard burden to bear for a people so steeped in thoughtless depravity. Worse, under Har Ganeth law, there is but a single penalty for infraction. The transgressor is led in chains to the summit of the highest sacrificial pyramid and beheaded. There can only be one punishment in Cain's chosen city. Only the foolish or the clever are law breakers in Har Ganeth, and it is not always possible to tell the two apart until the executioner's blade sweeps down. The truly clever have made an elegant escape long before this point. This situation certainly does not mean that internecine rivalry is less prevalent in Har Ganeth than in other cities. It is merely conducted in a different manner. The Dreadlords long ago learned that commissioning a murder is as likely to end with their death as it is that of the victim. Therefore, they concentrate upon tricking rivals into acts of law-breaking that can only be answered by the executioner's blade. Such plots are seldom anything other than subtle, and they can take years to finally reach fruition. Har Ganeth is a den of shadow politics like no other, where every request or concession is merely a piece in a wider game of disgrace and death. There is one being in all of Har Ganeth who is above its many laws. Crone Helebron has ruled the city almost since its founding, and sees no reason to obey her own dictates. Whilst she invites petitions from those who would purchase a portion of her immunity, for suitable favors naturally, such requests are few and far between. It takes a scoundrel of a particularly bold or desperate sort to barefacedly admit law-breaking intent to she who is the supreme enforcer. Only on Death Night, an eve of bloody excess in Cain's glorious name, is Har Ganeth's order thrown completely to the winds. Elsewhere in Naggaroth, Death Night is celebrated almost exclusively by witch elves, and other dark elves do all that they can to avoid being offered up as sacrifice to the Lord of Murder. In Har Ganeth, however, everyone participates in the madness of Death Night. It is the one brief interlude in which a year's worth of pent-up wickedness is allowed free rein. The great gates of the city are sealed, slaves and prisoners are set loose in the streets, and the very air crackles with anticipation. As the moon rises, madness descends. Wine and blood flow like water through the city. Wild screams split the night, and half-eaten corpses clog the gutters. Witch elves dance naked around the bodies of the slain. Flagstones grow slippery with spilled entrails, and everywhere, stupefied elves lie entwined with one another atop the gore-drenched dead. Only as dawn rises, and a great brass gong rings out, does the debauchery cease. As the bleary-eyed survivors wearily drag themselves from the streets, the gates of Helebron's palace open, and her elite guard sweep into the carnal madness, searching for elves too sated to escape. These they drag to Helebron's chambers, and the great brass cauldron therein, whilst other hag queens choose to bathe in the gore of maidens and innocents. The blood queen of Har Ganeth favors only that blood which is spiced with the corrupt insanity of Death Night. The boiling sea, On the west coast of Naggaroth lies a region of islands and monster-infested waters known as the Boiling Sea. It was created many millennia ago, before the recorded history of the Elves had begun. An immense earthquake ripped apart the coasts bordering the far sea, and toppled them into the seas, fashioning the patchwork of islands that now run along the length of the western coast. The earthquake also tore deep rents in the seabed, terrible wounds in the world's flesh that have never healed. Through these fissures, molten lava surges up from the world's core, heating the water and creating great bursts of explosive vapors. In parts, the sea literally boils, giving rise to the region's name. Of all the Dark Elves' warships, only the Black Arks dare to enter this inhospitable and dangerous territory. They do so for one reason only: to capture the monstrous sea creatures that have become such an important part of their fleet. Although many parts of the Boiling Sea are deadly to all forms of life, there are others where the mineral-rich waters teem with all manner of savage predators. Many such beasts, notably the ferocious hell drakes and the vast sea dragons, have long served the Dark Elves as vessels of war. At least since the Naggarothi learned how to sorcerously fuse battle fortresses to the beasts' backs. With more and more of these creatures brought back from the Boiling Sea, the Dark Elf fleets have been dramatically transformed. Many Black Arks are now accompanied by flotillas of these primeval terrors. And that, I think, is where we are going to stop tonight. We have a few more locations to talk about still, but my jaw is beginning to ache, and I would prefer to read about this when I would enjoy it, because you will enjoy listening to me much more. I hope you guys did enjoy this video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.